Byron York has a piece basically echoing what I've said. But he says, has anybody actually read this manifesto? He says this killer was obviously worried about immigration, but he was also worried about automation, about job losses, about a universal basic income he wanted, about oil drilling, about urban sprawl, about watersheds and plastic waste, paper waste, a blue Texas, college debt, recycling, healthcare, sustainability, and more. In other words, he was a nut. Large portions of the manifesto simply could not be more un-Trumpian. He began the manifesto by expressing support for Brenton Tarrant, the man who in March murdered 51 people and wounded 49 others in attacks on a mosque and an Islamic center in Christchurch, New Zealand. And Tarrant wrote a 74-page manifesto entitled The Great Replacement that dwelt on demographic change in Europe, which Tarrant said was experiencing an invasion of immigrants with higher fertility rates than native Europeans. And Tarrant's writing deeply affected this killer. The first words of the killer's manifesto were, in general, I support the Christchurch shooter and his manifesto. And he went on to write, this attack is a response to the Hispanic invasion of Texas. I'm simply defending my country from cultural and ethnic replacement brought on by an invasion. But later, he referred to Hispanic immigrants as invaders, who also have close to the highest birth rate of all ethnicities in America. And he noted, actually, the Hispanic community was not my target before I read The Great Replacement. So he was clearly inspired, not by Trump, by Tarrant, who in turn said he was inspired by seeing demographic change in France when he traveled to Europe in 2017. Now, with that as background, writes Byron York, the killer expressed deep concerns about politics in the U.S. One of the biggest betrayals in history, he wrote, was the takeover of the United States government by unchecked corporations. He said he could write a 10-page essay on all the damage these corporations have caused. But the biggest problem, he said, was a dangerous political mix. Quote, due to the death of the baby boomers, the increasingly anti-immigrant rhetoric of the right, and the ever-increasing Hispanic population, America will soon become a one-party state. Now that one party, of course, was the Democratic Party. And although the killer had little use for Republicans, he was most angry about what he had seen in the recent Democratic debates. He expressed a number of reasons for his anxiety about immigration. Among them was the growth of automation in the American economy. Now, who does that sound like? Continued immigration will make one of the biggest issues of our time, automation, so much worse, he said. He said, obviously, he read reports that millions of American jobs will be lost to automation in coming years. Happened to be one who defends automation. He noted that while some people will be retrained, most will not. He felt automation would take away his future. He said, my whole life I've been preparing for a future that currently doesn't exist. The job of my dreams will likely be automated. The automation threat, he continued, means the U.S. will have to initiate a basic universal income to prevent widespread poverty and civil unrest as people lose their jobs. That sounds like a leftist. Andrew Yang, the Democratic presidential nominee, has talked about universal basic income. Cory Booker's talked about universal basic income. Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders have. The killer's idea was that fewer invaders, quote unquote, meant more resources for government programs. Then there was education, the price of college and the job market. He wrote, the cost of college degrees has exploded as their value has plummeted. As a result, a generation of indebted, overqualified students are filling menial, low-paying, unfulfilling jobs. And then the environment. Americans enjoy an incredible quality of life, he wrote, but our lifestyle is destroying the environment of our country. Corporations are destroying the environment by shamelessly over-harvesting resources. That sound like Trump? There was more. Urban sprawl creates inefficient cities, he wrote, which unnecessarily destroys millions of acres of land. And we even use God knows how many trees worth of paper towels just to wipe water off of our hands. Who does that sound like? The governor of Washington State? Inslee? Now, after his environmental concerns, the killer incredibly moved to discuss the AK-47 versus the AR-15. Says, I'm against race mixing because it destroys genetic diversity and creates identity problems. Racial diversity will appear as either race mixing or genocide will take place. But the idea of deporting or murdering all non-white Americans is horrific. Many have been here at least as long as whites and have done as much to build our country. He then suggested dividing America into a confederacy of territories by race. And he ended the manifesto by saying he expected to be killed in the attack that he would allegedly carry out. He said his actions would be misunderstood as being tied to Trump. Misunderstood as being tied to Trump. It really doesn't matter. The Democrats and the media, that's all they do. He said, my ideology has not changed for several years. My opinions on automation, immigration, and the rest predate Trump and his campaign for president. I'm putting this here because some people will blame the president or certain presidential candidates for the attack. This is not the case. I know that the media will probably call me a white supremacist anyway and blame Trump's rhetoric. The media is infamous for fake news. Their reaction to this attack will likely just confirm that. That was the only time Trump appeared in the manifesto. The only time. And Trump's critics, they've charged that Trump inspired this guy to kill. They've charged it so often in the last few days that it's hardened into a general perception that the killer was inspired by the president. Read the manifesto. It's just not in there. It's just not in there. I'll be right back.
Mark Lopin.
Every